Hi, and welcome to The Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com. Today we are joined by our guest host, filmmaker Heather Lenz, best known for directing and producing the Sundance documentary Kusama Infinity. Our special guest this week is the award-winning filmmaker Ondi Timoner. Ondi founded Interloper Films and is known for movies about visionaries challenging the status quo and personal documentaries that reveal the bittersweet side of facing seemingly impossible challenges. She's a member of the Academy of Motion Pictures and the Television Academy, and chairs the Nonfiction Subcommittee for Special Projects at the DGA. Ondi is the only director to win Sundance's Grand Jury Prize twice for Dig. And we live in public. Both films are in MoMA's permanent collection. Her numerous credits include her 2022 documentary, Last Flight Home, about her father's end-of-life journey. It was Oscar-shortlisted, Emmy-nominated, and earned her the Visionary Award for Observational Filmmaking, as well as the Humanitas Prize. Today, we'll discuss her recent documentary, All the Walls Came Down, about the historic LA fires that took her home and town of Altadena early in 2025. The film premiered at the Telluride Film Festival.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for the introduction, and thank you, Ondi, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Today, we'll discuss your new documentary, All the Walls Came Down, about the historic LA fires earlier this year. Please take us back to the moment you found out about the fires that devastated your neighborhood. What was it like to learn that your home was gone, and how did you decide that you wanted to make a documentary about it?
Hi, thank you for having me. I was in Europe at the time filming a film about the Holocaust. And so I was, I think, waking up when the fire broke out in Altadena. It was like 5 in the morning, and I was trying to catch a flight from Rome to Budapest with my wife and composer, Morgan Doctor. And obviously, like my brother was just evacuating my mother, and Eaton Canyon was on fire, and the Palisades in Malibu had been burning for most of the day. So we were trying to find a place for them to evacuate five adults and seven pets, and we didn't know what to do. I mean, besides finding a place for them to go, we were pretty powerless. And then checked the Watch Duty app through the day, and it never updated, never said our street burned. I finally interviewed the founder of Watch Duty, who explained to me that they get their information from first responders, and there were no fire trucks or evacuation orders in West Altadena, so we didn't have any intel whatsoever. Even 2 days after the fire, it still didn't say that our house burned down. But I heard from a neighbor, my neighbor Randy from across the street, via text message around 6 p.m. in Budapest, and it was just obviously shocking and very, very difficult to wrap my head around the information that the home that I had raised my son in and that was my sanctuary and my safe spot in the world was gone, just completely vanished in a night. It was very shocking. And I didn't know that I would make a film. I didn't even think about making a film. Obviously, at first, I just thought about, I didn't think about anything. I just was shocked and horrified to find out that my mom's cat was in the house. That's what really threw me over the edge. And then, of course, insurance makes you list every single thing you've ever lost. And so that is a very painful, traumatic process that every one of my fellow climate refugees from this time of this fire complained about, how horrifying it was to do their insurance lists. And I remember going ahead with my shoot because I had an interview with a Holocaust survivor the next morning in Vienna, and I did not feel I could cancel on him. And I felt so I just put off all of the details of FEMA and Red Cross and insurance lists and everything and went about doing my job. I went to his house. He opened his arms to me, 87-year-old man who, when he was 6 years old, was in a concentration camp, and his father had been murdered by a lethal injection to the heart. And so he says to me, "I'm so sorry for what happened to you." And, in that moment, I just had so much perspective. How can it even compare to what he's been through, And so that's the gift of filmmaking. I sat down with him and did the interview, and Legendary, the company that I'm making this film for, offered obviously for me to cancel because the house burned down and to cancel the rest of the shoot. And I said, well, I'm going to interview Joseph, but I don't know about going on from there. So let me let you know after this interview. And by the time I was done with the interview, which has now become sort of a pillar of that film, um, I was I was just I was just sure that creating something new in the wake of all this destruction was the right energetic move to make, if that makes sense. I was like, wow, we just did this interview, and first of all, it gave me so much perspective. And hearing about the bombing of Dresden and hearing about the death march that he survived and praying to God at the age of 6 that he should die, none of that was happening for me. I just lost everything in a night, and it's hard and harrowing and it's been very painful since then, but it's nothing compared to that. So I kept going with the shoot. I told Legendary, let's keep going. And about a week later, when I was done shooting in Italy, I got on a plane and I opened my computer to do the insurance list of lost artwork. And that's when I realized all of my letters and journals and that my son's cards to me when he was growing up, he would do these incredible cards, that they were all gone. And that was when I just had let out this sort of guttural cry on the airplane on Delta from Rome to New York. And I just sort of like didn't stop crying for 10 hours and just kept, swiping my phone, trying to find any images of them in iCloud. And that's sort of when the material meeting the spiritual hit me, if that makes sense. So that's my story of like the immediate aftermath. But once the dust settled a little bit, I had my movie Dig Double X opening in New York, and I had decided already that I was just going to keep going with my originally scheduled life. So I went and opened that film in New York, and it was very heartening to see it on screen. As I would walk in for the Q&As, I would see Dig Double X, and I'd think, oh my gosh, you can't burn that. It's on screen. So that made me feel better. And then, yeah, I told Maggie Contreras, who's a filmmaker herself, she made Maestra. She had reached out and said, I'm going to produce the shit out of your life when the fire happened. And I thought, that is so kind, but I don't even know what that entails. But I'll take any help I can get right now. So she had already kind of been on board with getting replacement, passports and documents for us or whatever we needed. And I said to her, hey, do you think you can rustle up some cameras? When I get back, I want to go and see the house. I'm going to try to get past the National Guard, which had the entire, town blocked off because the whole town's destroyed. And I'm going to, try to get past them with some documents. And Yeah, she got some cameras. I just thought if I don't film this, then I won't have any matter with which to transform the experience. If there's something to transmute it to, right? If there's some kind of powerful message to come out of this, it would be irresponsible of me, given who I am in this world and what my job is on this planet, to not film, you know. So that's how it happened. That's how I first started, and we have actually, we were the first cameras on the ground in Altadena. IndieWire wrote me a note saying that I was a journalist and covering it for IndieWire because Ann Thompson had written an article about me, and I said to her, "Hey, I need to get to my house, and I'll give you photographs of me going back if you can get me a letter to get past the National Guard." So that's how we did it, and that was, maybe a week or 9 days after the fire, I think it was. So,
Well, thanks for going into all of this. I know it's quite, it's still shocking. I believe, my in-laws also lost their house in the Altadena fire. And so they lost, everything, all the family photos, everything. And one of the things they lost was a photo of my mother-in-law's father who was killed when the bomb fell on Hiroshima. So people just lost like, all these, just so much. But anyway, documentary filmmakers typically follow other people or often follow other people, sometimes catching them at vulnerable moments in their lives. And I'm wondering what it was like to record not only your neighbors and community, but also yourself and your family as you processed your loss.
so I had made a film called Last Flight Home about the last weeks of my father's life. And what's interesting about that in relation to this is that I didn't know the whole time I was filming it that I was making a film. I was sort of not in denial, but I was just focused on giving him care. And I was more worried about forgetting a single word he said because he had had a stroke when I was 9, and I can't remember him able-bodied from before that. So I was in a full-scale panic because he was doing medical aid and dying on March 3rd. And I had, a matter of like 15-day waiting period with him uh, to 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 remember him and to hear anything else he said and to visit and to have him leave the planet knowing how much he impacted us. So I was focused on that and set up cameras as a way to survive it more and a way to, yeah, bottle him up somehow. That then turned into a feature film because it kind of spiraled out of a memorial video my sister asked me to make for his Zoom memorial like a week after he passed away. I sat down and I reluctantly turned on the hard drive of the footage I'd recorded. And I realized, oh my gosh, he's alive in this machine and I am able to spend time with him. It was like, I thought it would be really, really sad and would stir too much grief for me to sit there, but I actually found it quite healing. And so that all is to say that that's what caused me to film when came back to Altadena. And I just kind of am familiar through that process of making Last Flight Home with the benefits of doing that, right? Like if you can actually capture this kind of trauma as it's happening, when we are just padding our way through it and we feel like we're walking on the moon, literally, none of us having been through anything like this before, then you have something, that is potentially as healing as it was traumatic. So like almost the darker the tragedy, the crazier, right? The chaos. If you can manage to document during that time, I've come to realize um, it's a gift to other people. It can create a gift for other people. I would never have made a film just about myself going through this. I am an important part of it because I have my own iCloud and I have access to that kind of intimacy, so I can allow the audience into a certain depth of processing grief and trauma that the other people in the film, I can't quite get to that level with them because I'm not in their shoes. I'm not them. So that's why I play, I think, an important role in this film. But um, finding my neighbors going through extremely different circumstances, each one whether they're not insured because they own their own homes or they have, um, you know, a lack of insurance and they can't afford to rebuild and they don't know what they're going to do. They're homeless now, or they're living in their cars, or they're living in Airbnb, from Airbnb to Airbnb to motel and on. Um, my brother, even, who's just was a mile and a half south, and his house burned down, and there were thousands of houses between us. Like, I live by the mountains, but he lived in town. There would be no way a fire would get to his house. So every story had a role to play in this. And I was just so grateful that people like my neighbors, the Wormleys, let me in. They let me into their travel lodge motel room. They laid bare their grief. They shared even even their son, shared his story and his trauma over losing all of his toys. And everybody's perspective is extremely important to what this film has become. But then, of course, I met the silver lining, which is Heavenly Hues um, and My Tribe Rise, and the community coming together. That really is the glue, and that's really the point of the film. So, um, it's sort of like the structure is really interesting to me. It's like almost like dropping a pebble in a pond or a bomb dropping, and I go from like ground zero and then out from there in these sort of concentric circles to really experience the community. And I'm just sort of the way in, if you will. So, yeah.
What did you learn about the Altadena community through the process of making the film that you hadn't fully understood before?
Mm, I didn't know how much we all loved our town. I don't know that anybody had really talked about it. It's not like we stood around saying, "Isn't Altadena wonderful?" But it was so, so magical. It was just this very, very special place, up by the mountains, peacocks, wild peacocks flying overhead, walking through the driveway. You see some footage of them in the movie. They're still there, thank God, but I worry about them eating toxic sludge. But yeah, I mean, bear. I had a bear in my swimming pool. Big, huge deodora pine trees, and um, just we loved our town, all of us. So I didn't know how much we all intentionally loved our town. I didn't know that the reason that I lived in such a diverse community was because of redlining. I had no idea. I knew Owen Brown, son of John Brown of the Liberators, they that he settled there because it was a bastion of liberalism, um and he was a fugitive at that point for starting the civil, helping to start the Civil War. And I knew that, like, it was largely a black community, and that everybody had really quite sizable, it seemed a lot of people had pretty sizable lots of land and independent stores and restaurants. And I just thought it was a great place to live in that way. But I didn't realize that a lot of the black community ended up there because they were trying to settle in Pasadena or East Altadena, and they couldn't actually settle there. They were forced to buy in West Altadena. They couldn't buy in East Altadena or Pasadena back in the 50s and 60s. So I learned that through this process. And I also learned from, Heavenly and from others that they're not surprised, and they weren't surprised that fire trucks didn't show up. They were they were used to this kind of discriminatory practice. And it was sort of very eye-opening for me and horrifying for me to learn all this while filming this film. But yeah, I mean, I also didn't know, and I guess I should know, from watching many, many documentaries, and making many myself, the resilience of the human spirit. It never ceases to amaze me, I mean, in the wake of all of this. And you can see in the film the flattened land. I mean, it's like as if the place was bombed, it's just destroyed and flattened. Um, the town is gone. mostly gone. And yet, you know, everybody's coming together and the walls have come down and we are uniting to take care of one another, to form block communities. You know, like we have like block captains now, and we are sharing ideas and architects and builders and getting loans for one another and stopping, we have a petition to stop the foreclosures and trying to bring that to the governor right now, which I hope you can maybe link to with your podcast. Because the reality is the power company is actually responsible for the fire, and they've admitted that, Southern California Edison. And so the settlement is going to mean that everyone will have the cost of rebuilding covered by the this fund, this wildfire fund that California has. And so really it's about getting families to not get pushed out right now by predatory banks and financial institutions and bridging the funding. So that's really why the film came as fast as it did and why it's short, is because it's urgent. It's urgent. And so I didn't know that my neighbors, for example, didn't have insurance because they own their own homes. I didn't know that if you owned your own home outright, you didn't have to have insurance because I have a mortgage. So I had no idea of these circumstances, but it's not fair. And it feels like it's my responsibility as a neighbor, and a community member of Altadena for 14 years and really actually 21 years because I moved to Altadena, a different house, the one that my mom and dad lived in, which is 3 miles away, that little house in Eden Canyon. I moved there actually 21 years ago. So, and then I moved to the house that burned down 14 years ago. But yeah, it feels like my responsibility to try to help save as much of the fabric of the town as I can by using film as my weapon. So, yeah.
Well, as you mentioned, the film was made quickly. How much time did you spend shooting it, and how did you decide which elements were the most important to capture and include?
My nephew Eli Timoner came a few weeks after the fire. He lives in New York. He's 25, and he wanted to come and be with his father and mother who had lost everything as well, and my brother David. And so he came and he said, "Aunt Ondi, I want to help you film." And so he got into his PPE gear and started filming with me. And then, I had to go back to Europe and finish the film about the Nazis. And so he held down the fort and kept filming during that entire time. And then I took over for him and he went back to New York in May. And so we filmed for about 6 months, he and I, and then a number of volunteer DPs, who I'm so grateful to, all of them. And this team of, you know, people just, we stayed on it and we filmed for 71 days, 6 months worth. And then it became clear that the town was getting ripped apart by reverse mortgages and banks and foreclosures. And that if I wanted to impact the future of Altadena itself, I needed to make the film as fast as possible. And that's something that I've never really been in a position like that, Heather, where I'm filming something that could impact and change the course of history for a lot of people, who I consider, my extended family. So I needed to finish it quickly. At the end of July, I sat down and just started cutting. I have an editing partner on this film named Jesse Gordon, who worked with Eli, my nephew, to really pull clips together with another amazing story producer, um, who I've worked with on another film, Sydney. And so like the three of them kind of worked to pull scenes together, and then I sat down and just started cutting, and cut it very, very quickly for Telluride. Like I actually turned it around, within a week, an edit for Telluride. And then they said it would take a miracle to get in because it was like 2 months late or something. And they were already scheduling the festival. And I said, well, I believe in miracles. And I sent it off anyway, and they are just so wonderful to take a look at it. Even to take a look at it that late is extraordinary. For curators, I just want to shout out to Telluride because that's just so cool. And then the very next day, I got a message saying, "You're right, it's wonderful, and we're gonna make a space for it." So now we had a month, and the pressure was on to actually make the movie. Um, because yeah, I had to proof. It was almost like a proof of concept I sent in there. And then I had from 1 month, the last shoot day was July 31st. I mean, we're still shooting, but the last shoot day that's included in this film was July 31st. And then it premiered August 31st, 1 month later, if you can imagine. And then it actually opened in theaters 2 weeks after that. And it was sold out, sold out, sold out. And it extended and then it went across town and then it was sold out in New York. It's just been quite the anthem now for Altadena, where the town, the town posts about it, and all the town forums and pages, everybody comes out, and it just played All Saints Church, and it's going to play Waldorf High School, and it's going to, the community has really taken it to be their own, which is wonderful, and it's being used to raise money and resources for the town, which is great.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're getting it out there the way you are and getting so much support. I noticed in the credits that the film is an LA Times short documentary, and I'm wondering how you connected with them and what role they played in making the film, or did they acquire it after it was complete? How did that work?
Sure. So great partners, the LA Times. They originally were interested in a film of ours called The In Between, which is on the LA Times website. You can actually see it now. It's about the only hospice for the homeless in the country. And it's a very amazing place to spend time. So it's a short feature, it's 70 minutes. And they don't usually release short features, but it was inspired by an article of theirs that I read in the LA Times that my mom cut out for me when I was on the road with Last Flight Home. I took this article with me everywhere, and finally I got a chance to read it. And it was describing this place where, the homeless took care of each other. And it's funny because it's kind of a parallel with this in a weird way. But I never thought about that till this moment. But yeah, it's about community and it's about the empowerment that they feel as humans, that their lives actually matter to each other, and how extraordinary and unique that is. It's almost like the only uplifting film about the homeless I've ever seen. So anyway, that's called The In Between, INN Between, and you should check that out. But I was on a Zoom with them planning that release, which was last month or something, and I mentioned that I was filming in Altadena and that I had been filming The Fire. And they said, "Do you think you could finish it this year?" And I said, "I don't know about that." I think I was in Canada at the time. I was like, "I don't think so." I mean, I wasn't planning to, I was planning to kind of go the distance. And then we started talking about, because their coverage of Altadena has been so extraordinary. I don't know if you've read or kept up with it, but I mean, they should win every award for journalism that there is because it's been extraordinary. So they filled me in on everything that they were witnessing, and then we got to talking about what I'd been documenting, and I said, "Well, I'll be happy to show you whatever I come up with." So when I sent that off to Telluride and I got instant news, I sent it off to them. And they immediately were like, "Oh my gosh, we love this thing so much. We love it so much. We love it so much. We have to have it." And they were asking for it. And I wasn't sure whether or not, and I didn't move quickly, but they were just totally committed from the very beginning. So ultimately, I feel like passion wins the day, and it's really about having a distributor who really cares. I mean, we're heading into LA tonight to do a screening with the LA Times at the Culver Theater. And tomorrow there's a lunch at their offices and a panel about climate and that I'm on. And they're doing what they can in their way. And they're going to release the film on the anniversary of the fire, which I think is perfect. So yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. It's a very friendly partnership. It's more like a partnership. I'm free to run and do with what I want with the film beyond, but they get the right to publish it first. So,
I see. Well, it's great. I'm so glad you're having a great opportunity or a great, collaboration with them and they're helping you get it out there. So
well,
circle.
one more thing I should mention is that some of the fire footage in the film, a lot of the fire footage in the film that's extraordinary, is filmed by them. So that was part of the deal, and that was something that I thought was so important. Yeah, their coverage of the fire itself on the ground. I would shout out Karen Fauché, who is involved with the film as an executive producer also, and shot a lot of that footage on the ground. Like I wasn't in LA to shoot the fire, you know what I mean? So some of those shots are LA Times shots, and that's an extraordinary gift and contribution to the film itself. Okay, thank you. Want to make sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, linking, obviously you've made so many films, but the two that are just so personal about your family are this, the recent film about the fires and then Last Flight Home about your father as he faced end of life decisions and ultimately chose to exercise his right to terminate his life, which just taking audiences into that is just, I mean, it is amazing. It's so raw and bittersweet and everything. But there's a scene in it where one of his visitors asks him to think of a way to communicate, after he's gone with his loved ones. And so tying it back to the film about the fires, there's a scene where you find his bathrobe in the midst of all this devastation. Everything is burned at your home. It's just all gone. And yet here's his bathrobe untouched. And I just wondered what was that like for you to find that?
Uh, it was so inspiring um, to suddenly, amidst all of the destruction, after you know, digging to try to in this rubble. I was thinking about it last night, stepping down, walking up the stairs of my house and then dropping into a pit of the just ruins of our life there. Everything, because no fire trucks came even the day after or the day after that. So 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, uh, windstorm of 90-mile-an-hour winds with fireballs. The fireproof safe that we dug out was just completely incinerated. All of my money gone. All of my mom's jewelry that was in that safe destroyed. I mean, gold just melted to nothing, to nothing. All of it, opal, everything gone. Everything that, even in the bathroom where the robe was hanging, it was all destroyed. And yet, here is this cotton bathrobe from the 70s that dad wore all the time. He always wore this robe. He loved this robe. And when he passed away, I took the robe home and I brought it to my son and I said, "Hey, this was Pop Pop's robe. Do you want to wear it?" It's like it was his favorite robe. It's super comfy. I tried to convince Shuki to wear it. He was like, "No, I want nothing to do with the robe, of course." And so I put the robe away. I have no idea how it ended up on the hook on his shower enclosure, which is the only thing standing in the middle of the house for some reason. And right there on the hook is this bathrobe. And it's so weird, Heather, because I walked all around the house in, my space suit or whatever. And we set five of us, we're all over the place, trying to find the safe, like trying to, all this, the first visit back, this is. And at the very end, we we see this orange fabric fluttering in the wind, and there it was, the bathrobe. It was just shocking, but also it filled me with hope. It reminded me of what I was saying at the very beginning of this interview, that like I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know how I would feel. I didn't know what I would do. And but I knew that I should film because we don't know why things are happening at the time that they're happening. We're not privy to everything that's going on. We think we are, and we think we're in control and we think we know everything, but there's more to this life than meets the eye. And there's more to death than meets the eye. And there's more going on than we can see and sense on the surface. I think we only sense probably 10% of it, you know? So I have no idea how the bathrobe got there, but I do think you're right. Dad said so many times he would watch over us. And my friend Lucy Hayes asked him, how will we know how will we know? How will we hear from you? And he said, you'll know. And I will communicate with you. I'll find a way. And, his first flight attendant, because he had an airline back in the day before the stroke, he had an airline. And that first flight attendant, if you recall, in last flight home, she was visited with him on Zoom. And she called my mom after the fire and, was consoling my mom about the death of her cat, Rosebud, because they evacuated to my house first and they couldn't get the cat out from under the bed when they had to evacuate my house. Um, and they thought she'd be there in the morning, but she obviously died in the house. And she said that Eli left the robe to to show you that he brought Rosebud home. Um, so, so maybe that's what he was doing. I don't know. There is no explanation that makes any scientific sense as to how the robe is still there. So I framed
Yeah.
it. It's now
Yeah.
framed.
Well, for audiences, I definitely recommend watching both of these films together,
Yeah, watch Last Flight Home first. That's what
Yes.
we actually had a screening out here. I live in Joshua Tree now, and they screened a bunch of my films over the November 1st and 2nd weekend, and they were like, "Oh, well, we'll screen All the Walls Came Down and then Last Flight Home because that makes sense. You screen a short before a feature, you know?" And I said, "No, I think you really need to do it the other way because you need to see Daddy say he's going to watch over us that many times, and then you need to see the robe hanging there." So,
Yeah. Well, documentary film legend Sheila Nevins was an executive producer in The Last Flight Home, and I'm wondering how you connected with her and what it was like to work with her.
so she and I have known each other for decades, and she originally, I think, tried to buy We Live in Public in 2009. And it ultimately we didn't make the deal because they wanted internet rights and there was no internet component to HBO at that point, and we wanted to keep those rights. So we didn't work together in 2009, but she watched Last Flight Home. What happened was it premiered at Sundance, but Sundance went virtual that year. So it was Dad died in March 3rd, 2021, and then January 2022. Another really fast film, by the way. The other fastest film of my life was Last Flight Home. I think these things that are meant to be here, they just kind of come flying through me from the really personal ones, it's almost like giving birth. But anyway, so I take Last Flight to Sundance and we're all set up with our screenings, and then Omicron happens, and there's a spike in the COVID virus, and Sundance decides to go virtual at the last minute, and so it's goes virtual, and anyone in the country can see it that night. And I received a poem. Sheila tends to write in like these Sheila Nevins haikus almost, and she wrote me like a poem that night about how she was silenced by the film. There were no words to speak about it, and she started to pursue it at that point for MTV documentary films, and HBO also was interested, and so it was a bit of a bidding war between the two. And the funniest thing is, she called me one day, and I was in the bathtub, and I said to Morgan, my wife, I said, "Oh my God, it's Sheila Nevins on the phone. What do I do?" And she said, "Well, answer it." So I answered it, and Sheila said, "Ondi, I love your father. I love your father, and I could pick his face out in a crowd. I would know your father for the rest of my life. I will defend him. I will give him, the best possible release. I love your father. He reminds me of my Uncle Seymour." And she went on and on and on, and give me the film, give me the film. And I said, "So, well, I'll be in New York next week. We can sit down and talk about, the film and like what you might do distribution wise with it and what Paramount can do." And she said, "Oh no, if you don't give me the film, I'm never talking to you again." Yeah. So then I was like speechless myself. And, I got off the phone very nicely. I said, well, I'll get back to you soon. And contacted my family on the family text chain and said, oh my gosh, Sheila Nevins just said she's never talking to me again if I don't give her the film. And much to my surprise, my brother wrote back and said, you can't have Sheila Nevins on your bad side. You need to give her the film. So gave her the film, and then she showed up like 5 times. She watched the film every single time it screened in New York. She would sit through the film. I'd say, "Hey Sheila, do you want to like go talk during the film?" No, I need to sit through the film again. And so she just loves the film so much. She's a wonderful, wonderful human being and a very dear friend to this day. She came to All the Walls Came Down when we had a screening in New York. And yeah, we talk and text on a regular basis. She's just an incredible champion, especially of women filmmakers, it seems. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. How did you get into filmmaking and what advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers?
I just picked up a camera one day and I started filming people in toll booths and convenience stores when I was like 19 on a road trip. And I asked them, what makes them happy, what they fear the most, and what they think of gays in the military, because that was like an issue and a debate at that point. And it started all kinds of interesting conversations and insights, and people loved sharing their perspective. And this is before all of the social media and all that stuff and all the internet, even, so it was kind of like people weren't as camera savvy, and it was just not that you couldn't do it today, but it was just really fun. And it made my road trip across America really fun. And one guy I asked, what do you think? What do you fear the most? And he said, women with video cameras. And so that became the title of my first film that I made at a public access station that opened in New Haven, Connecticut. I was a student at Yale, but they didn't have any production facilities back then. And yeah, it's called 3,000 Miles and a Woman with a Video Camera. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting and so much more fun than writing a paper. Let me see if by my senior year, I said to all the professors who I was um, going to their classes at the beginning to see which classes I wanted to take. I said, I'll take your class, but can we have an agreement that I'll make a film instead of write a final paper? And they said, sure. So I took the classes of the 5 professors that said, sure. And one class was called Transgressive Women in American Culture. It was about women in prison. Um, and women who broke the law. And I used that to get into women's prisons. And I made my first feature. It was called Voices from Inside Time about, well, actually, that's a 60-minute film about women in prison. And then I met one woman who saved so many women's lives and was their spiritual guide and mother. Her name is Bonnie Jean Forshaw. And I got a chance to meet her on the very last day I was in the prison, and her story was so extraordinary. I ended up dedicating myself to telling that story after I graduated, and that became my first feature film, The Nature of the Beast. But it was really driving out, and then that eventually got her out of prison. But that was like it took 20 years to get her out of prison. But she died a free woman, and we were there when she got out of prison in 2015. But yeah, a travesty of justice that the nature of the beast is actually a quote from the arresting officer that said he didn't have to give her a phone call or a meal. Why would he do those things, unless she asked for them? That's the nature of the beast. Like she's guilty. She's presumed guilty, not presumed innocent. So he had it all backwards. And it was another case of our racist government and system. But anyway, I felt like the alchemy I could practice, having those tapes in the back of the car, driving out of the prison with these stories and freeing some part of these women from inside time, from in this parallel universe that's funded with our tax-paying dollars, but we don't, get any insight into how they're being treated. To be able to drive out with those tapes and share their stories felt like practicing some sort of alchemy. And that's what made me fall in love with this very difficult profession that is almost irrational, is irrational, documentary filmmaking. Yeah.
A
There's
lot of
that. today called Alabama Solution that is unbelievable about the conditions in prisons, which have degraded so much since even then I was there, since when I was there. So check that out. It's called the Alabama Solution.
Well, obviously, you're at an advanced stage in your career, but I'm wondering how you typically fund your films and in your experience, what are the pros and cons of things like grant writing, crowd campaigns, pitching investors, and any other way you manage to pay yourself and your crew?
What I do is I film whatever it is that needs to be filmed. I have a film that I'm making next that might be my last documentary because I'm moving into scripted a lot more. I made Maple Thorpe, which is a film that I wrote and directed. And I'm going to get back to doing that kind of work because it's interesting to me. But I shot a film, we shot a film last year, 200 days in 10 countries. And I have not edited the film yet. And so that's my next film. And the way that we did that was we just started doing it because it's about a couple that's struggling with a cancer diagnosis and adapting Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, into a screenplay, and it's the couple that wrote All Quiet on the Western Front, and it's really, really an extraordinary love story and really a thriller and a look at our healthcare system. It's many, many things, and more than anything, it's also about man's search for meaning, which is about how we can't really control what life throws at us, but we can only control how we react to it, which is, very much the idea of turning lemons into lemonade, sort of what I did with All the Walls Came Down too. And and so yeah, we just filmed it. We filmed and then we created a sizzle, and that's what I recommend you do. You film so that you can prove what you've been shooting and why it's important and why it's special, and then you need to rustle up some funding or just roll up your sleeves and edit a piece yourself. At cameras and media and computers are very accessible now, way more than when I started. You don't need to be at a public access station on a shuttle editing system. Now you can find nonlinear editing on your computer, on iMovie or whatever. And so, it's not, I wouldn't say make a whole film on it, but you can. I have, my friend Jonathan Couette made Tarnation on his iMovie. So you can do it, so do the thing that you believe in. That's my advice. Make a sizzle and then start sharing it with people and ask them to connect you to whoever they think might resonate, this material might resonate with. That's how you do it. And you got to be tenacious. You got to hang in there and you got to believe that you'll you'll make it happen. It will happen if you just hang in there, and you just don't give up.
Well, that's great advice. For anyone interested in following your career and learning more about upcoming screenings, can you please share your website or whatever websites are relevant and your social media handles?
Sure. So for this film and for the petition that we need you to sign to stop the foreclosures on our neighbors, it's allthewallscamedown.com. And interloperfilms.com is the main website where you can subscribe to our newsletter. And I'm starting a Substack very soon. My name is Ondi Timoner, and that is my name on Instagram. And we have all those handles on Instagram. And I also, yeah, recommend a film that we also put out this year called All God's Children, which follows my sister, who's a rabbi and who in Last Flight Home, and her partnership with the Black Baptist Church. So her temple and this church come together to try to stop racism and anti-Semitism in Brooklyn. And it's a 5-year experiment, which is very pertinent to our world today, where we're so polarized and don't listen or talk to each other. So it's an interesting model to look at. Um, and a crazy verite film, another crazy verite film. So, but yeah, thank you so much, Heather, for having me on and
Oh, yeah, thank you. And is there anything else you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
No, just the title. All
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.